Hello everyone and welcome. Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2 is now fully released, and the future of the series is looking very promising with the positive reviews provided so far for the game on Steam. But there is still so much more to appreciate in this game, as players are only starting to scratch the surface that there is to offer, and already in the time of the pre-order beta, there has already been opinions of imbalances and flaws, some of which are justified, many others just a result of vented frustration. You may know me as Oathmaster. I have played the original Battlefleet Gothic Armada video game for the entirety of its release back in April 2016, playing the multiplayer almost exclusively for over 2 years. I have took part in the championship series that was hosted by Tindalos, playing as the Imperial Navy during that tournament, and I have played and built up every faction in that game in the online multiplayer. I am here to welcome everyone new to the world of Battlefleet Gothic, and I make this video in the hopes of teaching you the mechanics of this game, to aid in whatever endeavor you pursue, be it leading the retaliation against Abaddon's Black Crusade in the campaign, building your dream fleets in the AI skirmish mode, or to be a feared rival to everyone in the multiplayer ladder. It is my wish to arm you with the knowledge you need to secure victory and stave off frustration in the face of defeat, and ultimately make your time in Armada 2 a much more positive experience. So let's get started. There are 7 different categories of vessels that are available to you in Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2, and each of them have their own distinct roles and benefits that can be presented to you when you are trying to build your fleet. Your frigates, or escort ships as they are called, serve as your picket ships. Their role is to identify the enemy fleet, spot for ambushes, and to attack at undefended locations. Light cruisers serve mainly as a defensive line for your larger ships, taking down fighters and frigates that get in range, while having enough weaponry to be a threat to any vessel you may encounter, due to the sheer difficulty that there is in detecting them. Cruisers and battle cruisers serve as the mainstay of any fleet. They normally have the most firepower for the points allotted to them, while having the durability to take that abuse in kind. The Grand Cruisers serve as a bit of a unique role, for only 2 factions in Armada 2 actually have access to these ships, both Chaos and the Imperial Navy. They will primarily serve as either your flagship for like a smaller base fleet, or they will fit in a unique role or niche that is currently missing in the fleets you have assembled. The battleships are the symbol of your fleet. They are almost always your flagship, they bring the most firepower to bear, and are almost always the biggest threat to an enemy fleet. And finally, Titan class vessels are currently only unique to the campaign itself and to perhaps the AI skirmish in a future patch from what we know. They simply put are your fun ships. You just throw them at the enemy and watch them destroy everything. And utilizing all 7 different categories of vessels will help prepare you for whatever the enemy has in store, whether they go for the solid running type of route and use stealth to their advantage, or it being in need of sheer firepower to win the day. Once you have your fleet fully assembled, or you're just starting off in the tutorial campaign, you will immediately have a lot of information available to you. On the right side of the screen you will have your minimap that will display the entire battlefield to you. Underneath that will be the game speed modifier. You can slow down and pause the game entirely from here. This will only be available in AI skirmish and the campaign, so keep that in mind. And underneath that will be your entire fleet roster that you have available before the battle itself. Once you select your first ship, an info tab will appear to you on the bottom left. It's displaying the shields, health, and morale for the 3 bars that you see. If you hit the arrow tab that's right next to the name of the ship you have selected, it will open up an entire stat screen or stat sheet of the ship you have selected, which includes their traits and the current status of their weapons. Directly underneath that stat screen I mentioned will be the behavior settings you have for these ships that you have selected. So you can change their engagement angle, you can set them to auto engagement if you so wish, which it will follow the patterns that you currently have set up. You can set the engagement range all the way to ramming distance if you so wish, as well as prioritizing for the broadside weaponry if you want to focus on the port or the starboard side, in situations where maybe a handful of your weapons have been destroyed. You also have a ceasefire option as well as a lock-on target, which allows you to continue moving your ship while allowing it to prioritize the specific enemy vessels that you want shot at. The yellow bar on the right of the behavior tab is your combustion gauge, and nearly half the factions in Armada 2 utilize this combustion gauge, which is a resource you use for evasive maneuvers, while the other factions have cooldowns for their evasive maneuvers. And utilizing this combustion gauge to full effect will allow you to greatly increase the speed of your vessels or to drastically increase your turning speed, allowing you to dodge torpedoes that are coming your way, or to just simply go to ramming speed and obliterate a frigate that happens to get in your way. To the right of that, you have all the command abilities available to the ship you have selected there, and they're all divided into subcategories. If you were to activate one of these abilities in each of these groups, it would trigger a cooldown for all of them that are in that category, with the exception of your weaponries in some cases and the management tab on the far right. But stances are your first group here. They allow you to get like a permanent buff to the ship so long as you have it active, and they are all for different situations. You have Brace for Impact that allows you to reduce damage and increase the effectiveness of your point defense turrets against torpedoes and fighters. Lock On allows you to be more effective at long range engagements, while Reload allows you to fire faster with your weaponry, as well as increase the recharge rate on your combustion gauge. The commands category serves as crisis management for your ships in the middle of a battle, and they serve at either repairing your ship with the emergency repairs, increasing your troop capacity with the Call to Arms ability, or just increasing morale with the encouraging speech ability and rally for your flagship. The next category is your assault options, which is how you board onto enemy vessels when you get within range. They have a limited number of charges on them, which you can see underneath the icons there, as well as the Call to Arms I already mentioned, but they allow you to cripple an enemy vessel from the inside and potentially get critical hits or just kill off the crew entirely, depending on the faction that you're utilizing. The weapons tab will only appear to you if you have a ship selected that has access to like torpedoes or anything that is like cooldown based or has limited charges on them. You will be firing them manually to get the most potential out of them, and depending on the weapons they will have separate cooldowns available to them. While the management group there allows you to warp out a vessel if it's about to get destroyed or at risk of being destroyed, allows you to cancel orders or do a group order. And finally, on the top left of the screen you will see the menu tab as well as an in-game clock, which is included with your latency should you ever play on an online multiplayer match. The clock is useful in this regard, for it makes it easy to kind of gauge how much time has elapsed, especially if you are in the process or waiting for your cooldowns to come back up, like your torpedoes or your fighter squadrons as an example, as opposed to individually check your ships to see what their cooldown status is at. But let's have a look at the actual stats of the ships now, for there's a lot to take in, there's a lot of information to be had here, especially if you're in the middle of the fight and you're trying to rapidly gauge how effective your ship is currently in the combat situation. I already talked about the shields and the health bar there, and they're pretty straightforward. The shields are regenerating health that will recharge after you avoid taking damage for a certain period of time, or they'll recharge when your shields are down completely, and the health is what you need to keep the ship alive. As soon as that's completely gone, your ship's going to explode in glorious fashion. But morale, it will gradually start to drop down there throughout the course of a battle, mainly through means of taking fire or getting rammed by enemy ships there, but it will slowly start to regenerate at a very slow rate, mind you, but through encouraging speech or your rally ability that your flagship has access to, you'll be able to build it back up as well throughout the course. And when this drops down completely, you will lose control of your ship unless you have a rally ability available at that time or you execute the crew, and that will just weaken your ship in general. Moving on from that, these yellow boxes you see here are basically your racial traits. If you were to scroll through all the ships in your fleet, these are generically going to be the same, but some of which are going to be unique to individual ships. Like the Spur is a unique trait to only a handful of cruisers and battleships for the Imperial Navy that allows you to do additional ramming damage if you were to hit. But otherwise, most of these traits are going to be consistent throughout the entire faction of the fleet you're building. And just below that you have the ship's weapon systems, displaying an array of different weapons that are either fixated on the prow, the broadside, or just turret or dorsal weapons on top of the ship. And while this will update for you over the course of battle, letting you know what weapons are damaged and disabled, it can be tricky knowing which individual weapons are actually destroyed. But if you hold down the Alt key or double tap it, it'll activate an advanced view for you. That will basically highlight any damaged components that are currently on the ship. Yellow will be temporary damage that can be repaired, and red will be permanently damaged results that can only be recovered outside of a battle. Also, you can turn this option on in the game option tabs there by toggling on the advanced view by default. This will also allow you to see the radius of asteroid belts and nebula clouds, so you can avoid them or use them for cover if the situation warrants it. Although if you want a complete report on the status of your ship, there are a bunch of tabs directly above your stances and your orders that will lay out what components are destroyed on your ship, as well as letting you know if the ship is currently detected or hidden. Now let's talk about what the rest of these stats on the ship actually mean there. For the 3 stats of your armor, the front, the side, and the rear, all distinguishes how much damage is being reduced as a result of damage in that arc. So 83 armor on like the prow of most of these Imperial Navy vessels is going to reduce it down to like a 1/6 of the damage actually being taken, while the side and the rear armor are only going to be taking a 1/3 of the damage. So in a lot of situations you're going to get so much more durability out of your ships if your prow is facing towards the enemy, but do keep in mind that that may also hinder the amount of weapons you have to bear on your opponent as well. The identification range that you see here below the armor stats is a general rule of how far away you have to be from an opponent before you actually detect them. Otherwise, they will normally appear as a red circular dot that you cannot actually shoot at. And to give you a very quick representation of how far away 9,000 units range is, it's basically that outer circle with the teal, the cyan type of line, while the dark blue circle here is your detection range, and this allows you to reveal invisible ships when they reach this certain point. Now your speed and your rotation speed are pretty self-explanatory. This is the actual mobility of the ship itself. The speed is how fast the ship can go straight forward, and the rotation speed is how many degrees it can turn every second. The defense turrets is basically what you use to defend yourself against torpedoes and fighter squadrons that are coming near your vessel. The larger your ship, generally the more point defense you have access to or defense turrets, so it will make it easier for you to repel any aggression that way. Bravery is just a modifier towards how much morale damage you take over the course of a battle, with 0 being basically the average. It doesn't increase or reduce the modifier towards how much morale damage you take. There are a few factions that get increased bravery, and a few other factions that actually get a negative modifier for their bravery. While the boarding damage and the lightning strike damage below that indicates how much troop damage that the ship can actually do, should it do one of those orders. And the troop numbers down below is basically a rough representation on how much troops is on the ship. And the important thing to keep in mind when you're looking at the troop numbers is that there's actually 3 different phases towards your troops, which basically weakens and reduces the effectiveness of the ship's operations as you continue to lose more and more troops, until eventually there's no crew left at all, which then you're left with a derelict hulk. And it's really easy to tell how far along your ship is towards that process, for there's 3 little bulbs on the left of the health bar on each of your individual ships. That allows you to easily keep track of this, with it being color-coded based on how far along it is as well. And the critical assault chance that you see here is basically the likeliness that you will inflict a critical hit should you do a boarding assault of any kind, whether they be assault ships or boarding torpedoes or just straight up assault strikes and lightning strikes. They all have the same chance. Now let's talk about how the battle itself will play out. For basically, at the very start of the game, you'll be asked to deploy your fleet in any array you wish on your corner of the map. It'll be highlighted with your faction symbol there in a highlight blue zone. Your ships will only be allowed to deploy here, but it gives you an opportunity to position them how you wish and set up control groups you're hitting like control 1 through 0 there if you so wish, as an easy way to select through your fleet. You will also be able to determine how spread out your fleet is as well when you're deploying them by holding down the right mouse button as you're doing it. And then once you are ready, the battle will begin, and pretty straightforward. The main victory condition you can go for is to destroy the entire enemy fleet, or you can choose to try and capture the strategic points that are laid out across the map. For both capturing these points and destroying enemy ships will give you a score towards your victory condition on the top of the screen. But a complete destruction of the enemy fleet will give you an immediate victory if you are able to pull it off. During this early portion of the game, and you can do this as well while you're deploying the fleet, you'll want to choose certain stances that you want your ships to have. Either lock on, reload, however you feel is necessary. For all of them will give you benefits that you can take advantage of even as you're traveling towards the center of the map. and even certain vessels, primarily your frigates and your light cruisers, all have additional access to running silent, which allows your ships to be completely concealed and they will not even show up on the main map or on the map itself. You will easily be able to tell if the ship is invisible and hidden because it will become transparent when you activate running silent, as well as when you fly into a gas cloud that allows you to be concealed as well. However, if you were to take aggressive action towards an enemy unit either by firing your weapons or activating a skill, it will briefly show a silhouette of the ship displaying what it is and its location to the enemy. You will still be safe from enemy fire, mind you, but the enemy will know where the attacks are coming from, and the frigates themselves have a scanner ability that allows them to reveal hidden units at a great distance. It is on a 9-second cooldown, mind you, but it is something you need to be aware of if you're trying to rely on stealth to maneuver your fleet. But during this early stage of the game, fighters are going to be launched, torpedoes are potentially going to be coming your way, and how you mitigate a lot of this, of course, is formation, having your ships grouped up. And with the ability of running silent, you have the means of allowing your frigates and your light cruisers to get up in front of everything else, for the fighters have to actually see the ship that they're targeting, or at least a little red blip. They cannot target anything in solid running, so you're kind of free to have your light cruisers and frigates intercept, basically dealing with any dangerous number of fighter squadrons, as well as any seeker missiles or torpedoes that are threatening to hit your fleet. And this will be important even as you get within firing range of your opponent, for you have a lot less time to react and deal with potential threats like that, as well as everything else that are coming your way. Like, you may be dealing with a very aggressive fleet that may want to get in your face, and fleet cohesion is likely going to break during that point. But depending on your skill and ability to kind of manage that, your fleet formation, and have other ships kind of shield for each other when your ships start getting weakened down, you can see yourself through and get a solid victory as a result, even against overwhelming odds. And then as fleets start getting destroyed or start getting crippled, the strategic points start to become more valuable there if you're going for a point-based victory. And if everything goes well for you, you're going to have yourself a dominating victory. And if you are playing the campaign, hopefully you will have very minor damage to minimize on repair time. But this has been my first video talking about how Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2 functions in the grand scope. I will be continuing to make more videos in the future, talking about more of the specific mechanics the game has to offer, as well as talking about each of the different factions that are in the game as well, to talk about their strategies and how they play out. So I thank you everyone for listening, and I hope to see you on the battlefield.